Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. And do we have a lot of stuff to talk about. Riot just gave us our first taste of what is actually going to be going live in the preseason, or mid-season, my apologies. And additionally gave us our first look at what the tank updates are going to be looking like. So let's go ahead and break down the post that Meddler put up earlier today. So first, obviously, let's talk about the champions. The three big reworks this patch were going to be Sejuani, Maokai, and Zac, and there weren't going to be any small reworks. In fact, they decided that they're just going to go a patch-by-patch basis on these reworks as opposed to releasing them all at once. In fact, you already saw the Amumu mini rework in the last patch, and now we're going to be hitting the biggest reworks for this mid-season. So first up is Sejuani. I actually don't quite know what to make of the changes. Obviously, we don't have any gameplay information yet, nor do we have many trailers showing the new abilities in action, so a lot of what I'm saying is going to be speculation. However, we do know that Sejuani's W, E, and Ultimate have all changed, in addition to some small tweaks to her passive. First, Sejuani's new W is a lot like Rengar Q in that it's a slash and smash ability. There's a cone in front of you that you do damage in, and then there's a line in front of you that she does damage in. And each of these hits will stack Frost. Now, Frost can be stacked on enemies by her melee allies as well now. And if you stack enough Frost, Sejuani can apparently point and click stun these enemies. Now, the biggest question for me is, can Permafrost be used on multiple enemies? Does Sejuani have to pick and choose who she's stunning? Is it everybody in the same area? I'm not quite sure what to make of that. I don't know how allies are going to stack Frost, how that is going to represent in game. Does Sejuani have to be close enough? It's a lot of questions at the moment. We'll know more, obviously, next week when the patch starts to come live, but it's a lot of good questions. I think it does give Sejuani a decent amount of power in team fights, especially if she can get a bunch of damage on them all at once and stack up Frost on multiple enemies and then stun them all at the same time. I think that could be a decent niche for her to have. It's also interesting that Sejuani incentivizes melee champions. You don't want to have a lot of ranged champions, so that way you have as many people as possible that can stack Sejuani's passive, so that'll be very interesting. Sejuani's ultimate, though, accordingly was nerfed. Now it just creates a large slowing field where it lands. Now, my questions are, does it still do damage? I'm assuming so. Clearly less damage than before. And what's the slow percentage? It's a fairly large field from the look of it, but my biggest question is that going to be a large slow or a small slow? That's going to have a lot of impact on how Sejuani actually behaves in team fights. I do like it, though. I think they're interesting changes. We'll just have to see how it actually boils down when we get into game and see how Sejuani plays now that she's not just an ult bot, because let's be honest, she was beforehand. Next up, Maokai. Maokai got a few tweaks to his other abilities, not really worth mentioning here. Saplings do more damage in bush. His passive now is a cooldown, but its cooldown is reduced every time you're hit by an ability, that kind of thing. But Maokai's ultimate was actually completely changed. Before, it just gave him a 20% damage reduction zone around him that could deal damage when he either died or when he deactivated the ability. Now, however, Maokai's ultimate is a big creeping wall of roots that deal damage and root enemies they pass through. It's a very wide ability, but it moves very, very slowly. Now, if I'm assuming it can move through terrain, giving Maokai the ability to set up some pretty decent ganks, maybe using it as a zoning tool, but also I'm curious how much damage it deals and how long the route is, because it is a very predictable ability, I guess you could say, and so I'm hoping it has a fairly large payoff for the amount of time it's going to take to actually reach enemies. Because it kind of changes Maokai. He's supposed to be a Vanguard, but now it kind of feels like Maokai has to start the ultimate before he even goes in, and then hopefully crowd control them long enough that his ult can land. Alternatively, Maokai is now a decent champion for follow-up initiation, so if you have someone like a Malphite in the jungle or like a Kled to charge in on people, and then the Maokai ultimate comes from behind and eventually hits enemies while in the area you're fighting. There are a few uses for it I can think. I'm just hoping that its numbers are tuned high enough that it does feel powerful, because otherwise it takes so long to get there, it may or may not actually be worth taking the hit. Next up, we do want to talk about Zac here. Excuse me. So Zac actually had a couple of interesting changes. His Q is now a two-part ability. Zac's first cast will cause him to basically attach one of his arms to a target enemy unit, and then his next auto attack will cause that unit and the previously struck unit to become smashed together and both take damage. Now, it seems like an interesting ability. I'm not sure quite how useful it will be. I'll have to really see how it plays in game. Again, that's an ability where there's only so much you can do through text while describing it. I would like to see a little bit more information from Riot first. Secondly, his ultimate was fairly substantially changed. Instead of bouncing around and knocking up enemies for a couple of bounces, now Zac basically depresses, turns into a puddle at the location he's at. If he releases the button immediately, he just pops up and does the damage and knockback like he did normally, so that good team disrupt. However, if he holds down the button, he'll basically pick up all enemy champions still standing on him and then carry them to target location. Now, I am not really a fan of this change. I feel like Let's Bounce was actually one of Zac's more interesting tools, because it did offer lots of team-wide disruption in the middle of fights, lots of team-wide damage, and this new ability, I'm not sure how useful it is to carry enemy units to a location. You don't want to carry them into your team. You don't want to carry them out of your team. So where are you carrying them? I guess maybe the enemy jungler, if they jump on you trying to steal a Baron and then you carry them away. I don't know, it seems like a weird ability. Again, I'll be interested to see how it actually gets used when it's released, but it does seem like a weird place to look, especially given that Zac's W wasn't changed at all, and that's the most boring ability he has on his kit. I was fully expecting that ability to change, and it wasn't changed at all, so a bit of an interesting place, but I guess we'll see how Riot actually decide to go with Zac from here. Next up, Herald is actually getting some fairly substantial changes. Beforehand, Herald just wasn't ever worth the health cost of taking, and if it was tuned high enough, then getting it basically guaranteed that your top laner was now invincible. You couldn't kill them by themselves, they'd outdamage you, they'd outsplit push you, all sorts of bad stuff. So now it's being changed so that when you kill it, you get an item that sits in your inventory, and it gives you an empowered recall as long as you have it. Once you use that item, it summons the Rift Herald in the lane, and it'll crash down that lane and attack towers and try to kill them. And this is a very interesting place to be. It actually gives Rift Herald a reasonable amount of objective control, as opposed to the Drakes, which pretty much just give team-wide buffs. So I could see teams incentivizing going for Rift Herald a lot earlier now, because getting one and then properly pushing with it could lead to some pretty wide tower swings, especially if you're able to defend it and get into a team fight. Now, the biggest thing is Rift Herald does ignore champions. It won't attack them at all, so it's of limited effectiveness if the enemy team just decides to fight you, but I do think it's a good way to force the enemy team to group, especially if you're already ahead. It does still feel like a win more mechanic, but we'll have to see. I do feel like it's a much better place for the, it's a much better buff now for the teams to be looking for, as opposed to what it is currently. A few items were changed and mentioned in the post. I already talked about that in the previous video, so I won't cover it here. And finally, Riot actually looked a little bit at supports, and they're doing a little bit more to help supports out. I know I've been harping on about support itemization and support recognition in games, and Riot have heard, and they're finally doing something about it. A few new stats will be added to the post-game tracker, so wards placed, wards destroyed are going to be there, ward uptime, deaths prevented, champions shield and healed, those kinds of things. I think that's going to be a really, really cool stat to have. Shows off support contributions. Particle effects are going to be added for Exhaust and Mikhail's Crucible, so you know when your support exhausted a dude or when they Mikhail's you. So I think that's a lot of good places to be at. And support itemization is also getting a few changes. The Ancient Coin, Spellthief's Edge, and Relic Shield lines are all getting quests attached. So now, while you're using these items and gaining gold through their unique gold passives, you'll stack up. And after you reach enough quest stacks, these items will gain a permanent benefit to you. So, Relic Shield now will grant you a permanent shield that refreshes out of combat when you fully stack it. Spellthief's Edge will grant you a move speed bonus whenever you proc Tribute after you fully stack it. And Ancient Coin is actually receiving a few changes nowadays. It no longer gives gold passively over time every time a minion dies. Now it drops a coin anytime a minion dies that was not killed by you. And whenever you pick up a coin, it'll give you gold or mana, depending on which one you got last. Once you get enough gold, Ancient Coin will give you, it gives you an elixir that, when consumed, gives you an automatic skill point. So you'll be a little bit further ahead. It positions Ancient Coin as more of an ability to scale up for. We know we're playing Twitch Soraka, so I'm going to go Coin, and we're just going to wait it out, farm it up, and eventually we're going to be stronger than you when we peak. Is kind of the place it looks like Riot are going with Ancient Coin. I think it's a good niche to have. We'll see how the minigame, the coin minigame plays out, and the quest minigame, I'm not entirely sold on them, but I do think they're interesting, and I would love to play with them first before I make up my mind. Anyways, it's a lot of really cool stuff, and I can't wait for the final post next week, sorry, not tomorrow, not quite that early, but next week, and kind of see about how much changes they're making. We'll have actual numbers to look at, and just it'll be really interesting to see the full extent of the mid-season changes. Anyways, let me know what your guys' thoughts are on the champion reworks, the Rift Herald, the support itemization changes, any of those above. I would love to hear your guys' comments on that. Go ahead and leave a like if you enjoy the video. If you really enjoy the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I will talk to you all later.